Oops, I just made a mistake. I posted this to my personal Facebook account. PineCreek's in trouble. Do I delete it? Yes, happy Canada Day. It's July 1st. Hey, JD. JD, were you first today? 1,000 Pine points for you for being first. Gordo. Neil Chingy. Eric. Not expecting too many people to show up this late on a Sunday. But it seems like there's no good HBO series playing right now. They're a few weeks before Game of Thrones, so I was a little bored. And I wanted to share what I kind of learned over the last couple of years of... well, let me turn that off. That scared me. What I've learned over the past few years on questions that I've gotten the most pushback on. And sort of share those. And I think these are good questions that if anybody goes to an apologist seminar or whatever, you can ask these types of questions. And just hang on a second. Sorry about that. So question number one that I think is a good one. And I've done variations of this in the past, but is there anything your God has done in the past that makes you uncomfortable? As simple as a question that is, it's amazing how theists of all sorts, I think, but especially Christians, don't like that question. To admit that, I really don't feel good about what my God did there. It's and Mike Winger admitted this to me because I put my cards on the table. I said, look, this question is designed to pitch you against your deity. But yet an apologist, if you want to be open and transparent, I think you still have to answer this question. And I think it behooves you. I think it's good that you admit, yep, I think my God did something in the past that I'm very, very uncomfortable with. I think you'd get so many brownie points from theists and non-theists and atheists and other religions just for admitting that. But for some reason, they just can't do it. It is next to impossible. Hey, Tim Gore, thank you for the donation. Let's see. I will use that to buy chocolate ice cream at Cold Stone Creamery for my favorite child. Question number two that I've learned that Christians Christians don't like. So question one was about, tell me about something you're uncomfortable with that your God's done in the past. Question number two is, tell me about your doubts. And in two parts. Tell me the doubts that you've had in the past or currently have that Christianity is true, or that your God is real at all, or any God is real. And I think that's another question apologists don't really like to get into. Can you imagine an apologist standing in public, getting paid to defend their beliefs, and admitting, well, but these are my doubts. This is what I question. This is what I'm not sure about. But I'm going for the biggies, that your belief is true on your specific theism and general theism as well. Question number three. I don't know why this is so tough, but for apologists, they don't like this question either. What would your life look like if you left Christianity? What's the worst that could happen if one leaves your religion? I think both these questions are related, and both of these questions apologists, pastors don't like. Especially the second one. For some reason, they don't want to say the word hell or separation from God or anything negative in the afterlife. Some of them do, of course, and a lot of them are uncomfortable with admitting that they're needy, that they need the religion to survive, to have meaning, purpose, comfort, hope. And I don't understand that either. Like in Christianity, it's about being weak, so God is strong. So they should be able to admit that they would be a terrible person if they left Christianity, or that they wouldn't be able to love as well, or that they would do immoral things because they need that Holy Spirit to guide them to truth. But the problem is, the reason why they don't want to answer that question, because they know they can look around that's not true, that there's probably a lot of people more moral, more kind to their fellow human beings than they are, seem to have more joy and meaning and purpose in their life than they do, and yet they're not Christian. Question number 4. Oh, I like this one. And I haven't done this lately, but a good question to ask an apologist or a pastor: can you role play as an Orthodox Jew and explain a couple prophecies for me from the Orthodox Jew's perspective? So no preaching, no explaining your worldview. Become an Orthodox Jew for the next 10 minutes and explain Isaiah 53 to me, Psalm 22, Isaiah 9:6, Daniel 9. Can you do it? And be convincing. Can you do it convincingly? So many times I get accused of not really understanding Christianity. Well, I'm curious to know if they really understand Judaism. Question number 5. Yeah, it's a similar question. Can you role play as a skeptic or an atheist and explain why 500 witnesses to a risen Jesus or women finding an empty tomb is not convincing to the skeptic or atheist? So for the next 10 minutes, Mr. or Mrs. Apologist, or Mr. and Miss, I guess, is there any female pastors around? In the U.S. evangelical circles, not many. Pretend you're an atheist or a skeptic for 10 minutes. And explain why you don't find the 500 witnesses or women being the first to see the resurrected Jesus, why you don't find that convincing. See if you could role play that convincingly. Question number 6. Where are you? There you are. Oh, I love this one. It's so incredibly simple. Why is sin bad? And oftentimes they'll answer, but it's just a definition. Like, well, by definition, sin is going against what's good, and God is good, blah, blah, blah. But try to really unpeel that onion. What about sin? What about disappointing your God is bad? Like, why? Like, if someone took the attitude, who cares if a person disappoints your God? Like, what's the big deal? And I think a lot of them don't want to go there because they will have to go to severe consequences then, I think. Number 7. This is an oldie but a goodie. If God told you to kill your loved one, would you do it? This is the one that Frank Turk was asked recently, or I think it was this year, and he avoided that question and started talking about something else, and the guy just kept, and I congratulate the guy who asked the question because he kept right on that. And he finally did ask it and said, yeah, he would. But I think this is a great question because it gets to raising the cognitive dissonance, I think, between a lot of people's personal morality, their intuitions, and the whole idea of being a slave to a deity and so forth. It's one of those things like, blink twice if if your God has held you captive. Question number 8. I've asked this one many times, and I can tell in the eyes of the apologist or the preacher that this one bothers them. If God brought the utmost suffering to the world tomorrow for 3 hours, would that be good? So starting tomorrow morning, 3 hours, think of the worst possible suffering. Like everybody experiences third-degree burns for 3 hours. And God did that. Your God. Would that be good? Now they have to say yes, but everything inside them screams no. And they can't even go to, well, my God would never do that because his ways are higher than your ways. They can't say that. In this hypothetical, if God actually did, then whatever God does is good by definition, right? Yes, Dan Barker is great. Hey, Greg. Good to see you. Shades of Cascade. Victoria M. I often hear God can't be in the presence of sin, but they can't answer what happens if he is. Dan Barker asked Dinesh the same question also. Yes, I think it's a great question. Question number 9. I asked this one of the apologist Eric Lounsbury. How do you tell the difference between having a personal relationship with your God and just thinking you do and are mistaken? That's a great question. Another great question is, would you rather have a personal relationship with a spiritual Jesus or a spiritual and physical Jesus? And so many times you'll hear apologists or pastors talk about that their personal relationship with Jesus is akin to a personal relationship with one's spouse. But yet with one spouse, you can touch, feel their hair, can hug them, kiss them, hear them, see them. And so can everybody else. You can, with your personal relationship with your wife, you could tell your wife to give a message to someone and have that message come back to you. Try that with a deity. So if their God has forsook them for 10 years and they had no clue for the past 10 years, their God had nothing to do with them, but they just thought this God did. They just thought they had a personal relationship with this God. How would you ever tell the difference? This is a great question to ask an apologist or a pastor in a Q&A period. Question number 10. I've used this question of variations of this in the past. What's her name? Lydia McGrew. I remember asking this of her. And it was hilarious because I asked, what kind of evidence would you need to believe that my granddad or great-granddad had a 40-foot tall fire-breathing dragon? I've been told I said that word wrong. And she said, well, I have it on my, I don't want to misquote her, but something like she offered some things but really didn't know. And I said, well, what if I told you that I had a diary of my great-granddad saying that he had a 40-foot fire-breathing dragon? Would that be enough? Well, that could be made up. Well, what if I told you that my great-granddad had 12 friends who also saw the fire-breathing dragon, and a couple of them also wrote diaries? And right away she said that, or what if I told you even an enemy of my great-granddad wrote that 500 people saw this fire-breathing dragon? This is a great, simple thing to use to get to core epistemologies, and you can just see the double standard very, very quickly. That it's easy for the apologist or pastor to doubt, to poke holes, to be skeptical of my great-granddad's journals and his friends' journals and these 500 witnesses that one person reported in a journal, but they can't see it in their own religion. Now, this is the bonus question. I've asked this, I think, 24 times. I haven't asked it in a while, though. Would you switch places with me in the afterlife? Now, I just wrote this quickly, but that's not exactly what I mean. So ask I can just imagine going up and asking Frank Turek this question. Imagine you get to the pearly gates and Yahweh says, hey, good job, well done and faithful servant, Frank Turek. But you see that PineCreek Doug guy? Even though he's an atheist, I kind of like him. So I'm going to offer you this deal, Frank Turek. I'm the Lord, the God of the universe. I can do this because it doesn't go against my nature. I'm going to offer you, Frank, a chance to give up heaven so Doug doesn't have to go to hell, and I'll just poof you both out of existence. Annihilation. Frank Turek, would you take that deal? And I think out of something like 24 people I've asked that question, only 3 or 4 said yes, that they would. That tells you something about their motivations, right? It tells you that they really do look forward to heaven. For the life of me, I don't know why. The concept of living forever is really scary to me. I guess there's no concept of boredom in eternity. And there's no concept of pain and suffering in eternity, so in heaven. But yet that's what defines us, our weaknesses, our sufferings in a lot of ways. It's like Christians, Muslims, if you believe in paradise or heaven in that way, it's like, good luck. You're just a bunch of avatars up there, I guess, playing some type of idyllic video game. So anyhow, these are my 11 questions to ask apologists, and you can rewind if you missed any of them. I also wanted to apologize to street epistemologists, because a lot of people, Christians, will look at my channel and assume all street epistemology or all street epistemologists are like me, doing what I do, asking questions the way I do. And that's not true. It's not even, well, it's close, I guess, but no, not really. Because I focus on mostly the really close-minded, stubborn fish out there. And, guys like Reed and Anthony, there's a lot of great street epistemologists out there. And they're talking to like normal people on the streets, not people who get paychecks for having to believe this stuff. And so I interact with them differently. And I will make comments and make claims once in a while that street epistemologists would never do. Street epistemology is basically asking questions, getting to the why someone believes, what method they use to believe it. Is it testable? How would they know if they're wrong, and so forth. And so I can understand why there's some similarities, but I'm thinking of that Christian apologist woman, what's her name? S.J. Thomason. She listened to me for like 10, 20 minutes, something like that, and just I'm sure she must have watched some of Anthony's videos, but she kind of just lumped me in as a guy doing pure SE or something. But the problem is I'm an atheist, and I ask questions. And in the apologetic circles nowadays, that makes me a street epistemologist, or doing street epistemology all the time. And that's just false. Apologists usually proclaim they can convert many atheists if only they can have the money. That's a good point, Rembrandt. I wonder how much of this has to do with money. Because there's a need out there, and the need is to save our youth, our children, from what? What exactly are we saving the youth and children from? I think it's hell, right? It's leaving Christianity. And so there's so many parents out there who are willing to pay money to these apologists to help save their children. People over 35 or 40, the odds of them leaving their belief is probably, less than 5%? Like, I was very, very rare for me to leave at age 35 or 40. So it's all about, the tug of war for the youth. Is the story of the resurrected saints in Matthew 27 a historical event? Why don't the other Gospels mention this? Great question, Scrappy. A lot of apologists and pastors will hold dear to the historical method and say that the historicity of the Gospels is great. But you'll find apologists out there who will question Matthew 27. That's about the zombies, right? They will question that, and then they get flack from other apologists for questioning it. Another thing some apologists and pastors question is the guards at the tomb in Matthew, what is it? I forget, 20. And but I actually just saw a clip the other day of William Lane Craig even saying that probably didn't happen. It was from years ago. But the very conservative apologists and pastors, when they hear that, they're just like, that sends divisions among them. Doug, what you do is very similar to SE. Yeah, I admit there's similarities, but I call people silly sometimes, right, Rembrandt? I call people idiots sometimes, but I do it with a smile, and I do it after I have at least some social credit, and that's something a pure SC would never do. But I actually think I get some social credit for admitting that. I think even Christians appreciate that when I do that once in a while. I don't have a problem with providing some of my thoughts when asking while doing SE. Yeah, the SC that you see a lot of videos of, it's usually much shorter than mine, 10 minutes tops, sometimes more. But I go on hours. Like, it took me 45 minutes the other day to finally get Mike Winger to admit that he was uncomfortable with drowning babies in the flood. But I stuck on him like white on rice, and finally he admitted it. Hi, Ruckus. Lycona got fired for explaining in detail why Matthew 27 is not literal. It says Shien. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Shien? Cheyenne? Sheen? Spell it phonetically for me in chat, will you please? Yeah, I feel sorry for Lycona on that. There's actually, that's another great question asked really conservative evangelical Protestant apologists is, give me examples of some things in the Bible you don't think actually happened in history. They're probably going to say some parables, but maybe say, besides the obvious parables. Yes, you do, Doug. I said similar. Yeah, I understand, Rembrandt. But I think I go more into thought experiments, and I've said this. I lay my cards on the table. I'm purposely leading them into territory that I know, and they know that I know, that is uncomfortable for them. And I'm saying, let's see if you can do it. And I think that's different than pure SE. Aren't the tag proponents correct that we have to presuppose natural regularity, that we can trust laws of logic, our senses, our memories, induction, so forth? Yeah, and I do presuppose that the universe exists and has the nature and properties that it does. But unlike the, great question, Eric Morton, but unlike the theists or who believe in miracles, they can't presuppose that because the laws of nature could be altered, could be suspended if their God does a miracle. How do you do science when miracles can stop the repeatability of an experiment, right? Why does Paul describe the resurrection sometimes as a spiritual event and sometimes as a bodily event? Scrappy, I would even question whether he at all describes it as a bodily... Well, no, let me back up. This is... Paul describes Jesus as a bodily resurrection, but guys like Carrier and some mythicists would say that if you read the book of Hebrews, and even some of Paul's other writings, that where he talks about a third heaven, that there were people back then who believed that there were places and things up in space, the third heaven. If you look, just ask a flat earther, their model, there's levels of heaven and so forth. So Jesus was the anti-Satan. You've heard of the Antichrist. Jesus was basically the anti-Satan who came into the heavenly third heaven realm, was crucified and rose again, in a type of bodily form, a copy of the bodies here on earth, but it took place in space in the third heaven. I think most Christians who write guys like Carrier off don't realize that this is what he's saying. But Paul is also very clear that he's saying that everything that he knows about Jesus, he got through revelation and visions, not from man telling him. Have you used the outsider test for Lamborghini during SE, Doug? No, I don't think so. I think you're talking about the Ferrari thought experiment. Who do you think is the best apologetic? Who do you think is the best apologist out there? That's like asking which manure is the best flavor. I can't believe I just said that. Okay, no Christian's ever going to watch my channel again. Oh, brother. See, now an SEer would never say that. If you define best as most effective for the flock, for the base, probably guys like William Lane Craig. Yeah, let's go with him. When asked by Christopher Hitchens, William Lane Craig stated Matthew 27 might be allegorical. Yeah, William Lane Craig, I bet you, is not liked by some really conservative. Still can't believe I made the manure comment. Anyhow, forgive me, apologists, for I have sinned. Ruckus asks, what do you think about mythicists out there like Carey and Price? I think both of them are very sharp guys. I think Price, he has 2 PhDs. Carrier and Price could run circles around most historians in their field. I recently watched Carrier versus Craig Evans the other day, and Craig Evans is just like, never mind. It's I still believe that someone should SE me on this. I still believe that Jesus, it's more likely than not that he was a real historical figure, an apocalyptic type preacher. But the more I look into what we actually have, like, why am I believing that? Anyhow, I guess just because, well, it seems like, can all of this be totally made up? I think that's the simplest answer. Can you talk to God if you have not learned a language? Correlation between the emergence of languages and gods? I'm not sure if I understand that question. I think the Christian might say yes, it's a spiritual language. Craig raises a lot of money, the true measure of apologetics. Remember, William Lane Craig is the guy who just basically felt terrible and saw a happy young girl in class and said, what gives you such joy? And it's Jesus. And he looked into it, and wouldn't you know, he became a Christian. Could the reason why Jesus became so famous as a historical figure be because he was the first man in history to voluntarily give himself to be crucified because he thought he would be resurrected? No. Christianity and rabbinic Judaism are Roman propaganda. I'm sure some of it definitely is. But Shane, I don't even have to go into that depth with believers. It comes down to the core epistemology and showing a double standard of, like, in any other religion, any other belief system, you would doubt this. And so why are you not doubting it here? Not everything in the Bible. Oh, another question I should have had on that list is, isn't it reasonable to say that some things in the Bible are true and some things are not that purport to be true? And for conservative, hardcore evangelicals, that's a hard question to answer. Ruckus says, stick with what you said, man. I know that's how you really feel. Well, yeah, I'm not denying that. Carrier embarrassed Evans in that debate. I agree. If you actually, in the Evans Carrier debate in the Q&A, or not the Q&A section, but when they ask each other questions, Evans wouldn't even look at Carrier, and he didn't really even ask Carrier questions. He just kept on saying, well, this is nonsense to think that Jesus couldn't have existed. What evidence do you have for Jesus being a preacher? Great question, Alistair. I think if you just look at what the Essene movement believed, very ascetic, apocalyptic type movement, which is a sect of Judaism. There's a lot of similarities between this Jesus character. Bart Ehrman agrees with you, but the existence of Jesus. Apologetics is the friendly pat on the back to a doubting believer. Yes, Shades of Cascade. The goal of apologetics is not necessarily, it's like a bonus, but it's not, the main goal is not for evangelism. It's to keep people in the belief. Who would you like to interview the most if you could have them on? You know what? William Lane Craig would be fun. He would never do it, though. Frank Turek would be fun. With William Lane Craig, I would hammer him on the God morality argument. Like, if there is no God, there is no objective morals and so forth. And I would just say, why can't, if their only source for objective morality is your God, then aren't you saying that if there is no God, there's no God morality? I get accusations of straw men when I say that, but really that's what it boils down to. If the only source of objective morality is your God, then it just makes common sense that if your God doesn't exist, then there's no objective morality. It's like saying if the only source of Doug's arm is Doug, then if Doug doesn't exist, then there's no Doug arm. That's basically how silly and stupid William Lane Craig's argument is. Now, I understand some philosophers say that there might be sources of objective morality outside of Yahweh, but I don't think that's what William Lane Craig believes. Thank you, Equinox. Happy Canada Day, my nation of birth. Shan says, if you hammered William Lane Craig, he would do deep into philosophy, then it gets confusing. Oh, I hope he would. Because I'm just a simple farm boy trying to figure things out. And he would end up looking like a schmuck. Ken, the problem is we have no idea. Yeah. Scrappy says, the Gospels tell us that when the guards came to arrest Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane, he voluntarily gave himself up. Okay, I'm not sure why you're saying these things. Scrappy, are you a believer? Are you a Christian? Who is your least favorite guest so far? Oh. It was one of the precepts. Because, what was his name? I remember we started, it's from like a year and a half ago. And we started, and I didn't know he was a precept. And then like 55 minutes in, I found out that he was a precept. And you could just see in my face I was deflated. And he wasn't even like a precept, a fun precept that, you could kind of banter with. So Do you need a PhD for William Lane Craig to come on your show? I think so. Yeah. If I had 1 million subscribers and a PhD in philosophy of religion, maybe he'd come on. Religious apologists can't be trusted. They are trying to sell their bias. That being said, Equinox, I think I totally support apologists. They should be doing more and more and more. It just gets more information out there. No, you're a historicist. Jesus did exist. He was just an ordinary nobody. Okay, I can, but I'm not gonna push back hard on that. Interesting that you answered Craig. Personally, I don't think much of him. I don't think much of him either, Ruckus, but he would be interesting to talk to, I think. Because I think, I view William Lane Craig as he almost looks like it with his puppy face. Like he's a wounded child that just needs this comfort blanket. Is that too harsh? Like, even Christians, hear me out. If you compare William Lane Craig to Frank Turek, like one's a pistol. Like Frank Turek is like da da da. William Lane Craig is like, he's almost trying too hard to look dignified, I think. But you can tell it's just like he can't understand, he can't believe that some people just don't want to live forever. Yeah, Craig debated Hitch, and Hitch had no PhD, but Christopher Hitchens was way more popular than Craig. So Craig will debate, I think, someone more popular than him in that field. My least favorite guest you have had on is McClatchy. Brother-in-law, I think he was talking from a coffee shop. No, it's not his brother-in-law. You're thinking of McGrew. No, I actually like talking to McClatchy and McGrew because, more so McClatchy. No, I really don't like talking to McGrew because I just find him as very defensive. He's, what's the right word? Oily? He's oily. He's slicky. How many people confessed to the Lindbergh kidnapping? Over a dozen. Ravi Zacharias, yeah, that guy's in trouble. Being caught in some major lies about his resume. Turek seems like a car salesman. Yeah, but Turek's a pretty good car salesman. Hi, Brenda. Oh, it's not late where I'm at. I'm in the left coast. Christopher Hitchens eats apologists for lunch. Well, a lot of what I do is very similar to what, I'm kind of patterning myself after Hitchens with people who think that they have all this historical evidence and great reasons to believe. You ask them questions like, are you comfortable with your God drowning babies in the flood? Instead of just annihilating them. It's like right away, there's all these degrees, all these, a lot of Christians don't even believe the flood story is real, but for the ones who do, you can have 3 PhDs and just the wind goes out of your sails at that point. And you basically are left saying with what the guys like Mike and McClatchy say, well, I just trust that God knows what he's doing. It's basically a type of slavery. William Lane Craig is greatly overestimated. I have never been impressed by anything he says. Well, I'm trying to think back how much I knew of him when I was a Christian or how much I followed him. I followed more Ravi Zacharias when I was a Christian. And I think what appealed me to him was he was a great storyteller. And he does more storytelling than anything else. So you can ask him a really deep, solid question, and he'll go into storytelling, and then he'll, It's probably 95% storytelling with 5% direct answer. Yes, Andrew, you are correct. William Lane Craig is evidentialist, not a precept. However, he will say that ultimately it boils down to the power of the Holy Spirit to make a believer. So William Lane Craig which is biblical, but basically William Lane Craig says evidence is great, wonderful, and it's good tools are good pieces for the Christian to use to show why they believe. But ultimately, it comes down to the X factor, to the special sauce of the Holy Spirit. And he has to say that because it's in the Bible, basically. Regeneration. When I was a child, my father would say I was storytelling when he caught me in a lie. Good one. Well, Scrappy, one of the main reasons why a lot of people kind of like some of Carrier's arguments is the very, very first records we have of Jesus is from Paul. Is it Galatians? Is that first, or is it Corinthians? I think Galatians is first, right? Or maybe it's Corinthians. But anyhow, Paul does not, no, it's not even either of them. Thessalonians. But Paul doesn't talk about any of the earthly stuff that Jesus did. Doesn't talk about any of the miracles, so it doesn't say Mary's name, Joseph's name, Joseph of Arimathea's name, Pilate's name. It doesn't talk about any of that. Doesn't even use the word tomb or disciple. These are strange things that I've had Christians admit to me are, yep, this is weird. Are Mennonites Calvinists? No, they lean Arminian. At least the Mennonite culture I come from, most Mennonites are rural, agricultural-based, high on responsibility. You can do good and you can also do bad, and it's your fault and your reward. But they still at the same time will say that you're saved by grace, not by works. So that's an interesting perspective. When I grew up in the 60s as Roman Catholic, I never heard of Christians. Interesting. Yes, Ken, I think you're right. First Thessalonians is the first letter. Doug, as a whole, would you guess that atheists or theists like Thousand Island dressing? That's a great question, Randomals. I think, I do think atheists on average are more intelligent than theists, and so I think they would like Thousand Island dressing more, because to not like Thousand Island dressing is, in my opinion, a sin. Real Jinga, would you ever consider applying SE to other things that people believe? Are the police here to protect the people? Are judges really the best? Yeah. Real Jinga, my niche is kind of Christian apologetics. I've talked to, I think, 3 Muslims, a couple flat earthers in the past. But apologists are just so much fun, and pastors. Ruckus says, you have the best live chats out there. You're very open and honest, and I appreciate, and I'm sure other listeners feel the same. Oh, thank you very much, Ruckus. There are valid arguments that writings attributed to Paul didn't exist until Marcion. Yes. Robert Price, I think, even doubts that Paul is the Paul we think Paul was. What's the difference between immaterial and imaginative? I don't even know what immaterial is, so I couldn't tell you the difference. But that's a question that a lot of Christians ask: is consciousness immaterial? And I just read our price on Paul. I didn't realize what a mess the epistles are. Oh, yes, they are. And Paul bastardized the Old Testament. If you don't believe me, talk to an Orthodox Jew about that. The Big Mac special sauce, yeah, they don't want you to know that, Ken, but that is Thousand Island dressing with a little more ketchup. Is there any Christians here? At least flat earthers know there's an earth as opposed to apologists. You know, I love flat earthers in the sense that a lot of them, especially in the United States, I think make a great point that if the whole universe is basically our earth that's flat and that's sort of like a dome over it, if that is true, I think I have to become a theist tomorrow. I think all you guys do too. But now think of the what follows from that. Because the truth is the earth isn't flat and there isn't a dome. But the thought process is the same. That since the universe is so big and it's basically empty, basically cold, dark, and nothingness, doesn't that point to no designer, no fine-tuner? So I recommend you kind of hold up the flat earthers as a way to, kind of show those globalist Christians that, think about their thinking. A lot of them are theists and believe the earth is flat because they believe in the Genesis model. Greg later asks, am I blocked? No, I've never blocked you. At least not to my knowledge. And I don't think any of my moderators have. Although very few of my moderators show up except for Reed. Big Mac special sauce, In-N-Out spread, both Thousand Island dressing. Yes, the world is run by Thousand Island dressing. I think there's even a Facebook page about Thousand Island dressing if you guys want to learn more. Lots of Christians believe people deserve to be hurt, so they're God creating things in a way that hurts people is a good thing to do. Well, it's the whole sense of justice. Like I think even Mike Winger said, what did he say? Something about maybe God flooded the earth the way he did and didn't just poof them out of existence because he wanted people to experience pain. Didn't he say something like that? Or implied it at least. So he's basically saying, one of God's purposes of the flood was to put pain on people, including babies and toddlers. Someone suggested that I asked Mike Winger, would God told you that he's going to kill your loved one or your wife and gave you the option, poof or drown? It's very obvious in that case, right? When you were growing up Mennonite, what did you know or feel about the other faiths? Not very much. I thought basically Catholics and Lutherans and United Methodists were not real Christians. Of course, not Mormons. I knew enough to know that they weren't like me, a Mennonite. But I knew almost nothing about Islam or Hinduism. Especially when I was a young teenager. Who do you think were kind of out there, and who of them do you like better? I'm not sure. I think as a Christian, I thought the Mormons were kind of out there. That's for certain. Randomals is, I think I'm, administrator for Thousand Island Awareness. So that's why we're talking about Thousand Island dressing. What do you think about these crazy crook televangelists out there that plead for money for planes and such? It's they're scammers, that's for certain. And it's horrible that they're taking advantage of mostly old people. I think even a lot of Christians are agree with that. Even guys like Joel Osteen. The thing is, there's so many people out there with sucky lives who are in desire of hope and comfort that they can get away with it. But in a free society, in a capitalistic society, what can you do? You have the freedom in this country to ask for money and preach false things to people. So what can you do? I think what I'm doing is part of the solution. But the positives are that 50 years from now, I think those types of TV evangelists are going to be gone. The millennials don't believe, but they're going to be replaced with other crazy stuff. They're going to be replaced with a lot of new age stuff, crystals and that sort of thing. If I was to actually change my niche, it would be to go to that sort of thing. Horoscopes, crystals, what else? Power of attraction, law of attraction. Did you ever get picked on or bullied as a Mennonite? Yeah, a little bit. Not much, because I was almost my size that I am now, except in grade 7. So I was pretty big in middle school. And I was I was probably one of the smartest guys in the class, and one of the fastest too. I was a good runner. So even if a guy was bigger than me, I could always outrun him. But I do remember being picked on a little bit just because I was a Mennonite. Which denomination beats their kids the most? Oh, the King James only version, I bet. That's my prediction. How's your sister doing? We wish her the best. Oh, thank you. As far as I know, the same to worse. So for all you Christians out there who's been praying for my sister for, 3 years now? Your prayers have not helped. Ugh, it's a horrible situation. I could say so many things about that, but that Christianity caused this. I truly believe it. Not that she got MS, but that some of the pain and suffering she's going through is because of Christianity. Hey, Scrappy, if you're not a believer and, it really doesn't matter if Jesus existed or not, if he's just an ordinary nobody, like you said, if he's an ordinary nobody, then why talk about it? But from the Christian's perspective, then you got something to talk about. I guess it's still, if you're a historian, like you said you were, then that's an interesting topic. Yeah, I agree, Eric. Jordan Peterson's basically, his fear is that if you get rid of all religion, society needs a myth to continue. Society needs myths to, and this is similar to Sapiens, the author of Sapiens, that human beings need some type of myth to keep a cohesive unit. I've challenged people with prayer to keep track of intercessory prayer, not the prayer just for, when you're praying for other people or for other things outside of yourself, to write these things down and write next to it, what's the probability of this happening without prayer? And then what's the probability of it happening with prayer? And just keep a record of that. Make a list. Like if you're praying that you'll get over a cold, God, help me get over this cold quickly. and let's say 2 days later you get your cold is gone, and you say that God answered my prayer, like, seriously, really? Start assigning probabilities of it happening on its own with your prayer requests. Do I think Jordan Peterson is a charlatan? No, I actually don't. Because I've watched old videos of his way before he became famous, and I think he's pretty consistent. You're disliking Peterson more and more? Well, what I don't like about him, well, let me tell you what I love about him. I love his stance on free speech, or compelled speech. I think it's totally okay to say, no, Mr. or Mrs. Government, you cannot tell me what I'm forced to say. What I don't like about him is he sometimes reminds me of Sanji Chopra. Is that his first name? And that he can't answer simple questions, like things that he's investigated, like Christianity, that he can't say, no, I don't believe in a bodily resurrection of Jesus. It's hard to be consistent with a lot of money involved. That's true. He is making a lot of money now. But I'm a pretty hardcore capitalist myself. I don't, I remember making that Joel Osteen video, which is my most popular video. Never once did I actually denigrate him for making lots of money. I almost put the responsibility on the people who are so gullible to give it to him in the first place. But I do realize there's responsibility on both sides. So if Jordan Peterson can make $100,000 a month, so be it. I think he makes close to that a month just on Patreon. Keep in mind, there's professional athletes, professional singers, professional entertainers making more than that. Brian Dale says that C16 does not compel you to specific pronouns. Well, whether it does or doesn't, I still agree with him that no government should do that. And that free speech, that we should be allowed to hurt people's feelings, make people mad by just our speech, that's okay. In fact, I would love to do a video one time where I think I've done something similar to this, but where someone comes on, like a Christian comes on, and I just, for 20 minutes, say everything possible to offend them and just practice not getting their feathers ruffled, that they can breathe and be calm. And I honestly think you can train your emotional being just like you can train your heart and your cardiovascular to run a marathon. That you can get better at it. So someone take any political issue, and there's certain key phrases or key concepts that just makes people furious. Just hammer them over and over again, and all their goal is just to respond politely and kindly, make them immune. Is that video of Peterson and Harris out yet? Because didn't they recently, and someone else, debate again? Violating the Human Rights Code could land you in prison. Doug, what do you think? Do you think you were a better love maker as a Christian or as an atheist? Please ask your wife. Yeah, right. I'm going to ask her that question. Actually, I think the answer is obvious, right? Can you try to get Dr. Price on one day? I've had Dr. Price on Ruckus. You can go to my homepage channel and look at past videos. Dr. Price has been on PineCreek show before. Oh, the video is not out yet of Peterson and Harris? Okay. Richard Carrier and Jordan Peterson should debate. Who are some of your favorite YouTube channels out there? Yeah, last time I think I got myself in trouble because I said that I don't watch atheist YouTube channels. But what I meant to say is I don't watch very much. And when I do watch, it's not like start to finish. But I love Apologia. And not just because he's a fellow Mennonite, former fellow Mennonite. Who else do I like? I like Mr. Deity, especially his old stuff. He was very influential in me leaving Christianity because he got me to laugh at my own beliefs. For non-theistic type YouTube channels, I watch poker. I watch a lot of professional poker. I haven't played in a long time. I used to play online poker years back, like during the 2003 early craze, and I remember running it up from $30 to $3,000 when nobody knew how to play. I love watching track and field. So whenever that's on, golf, tennis. Reed, I'd love to see you do SE on someone who doesn't like Thousand Island dressing. Yeah, the people who don't like Thousand Island dressing, they're very doxastically closed, right? There are a few YouTube channels that I really love, theistic ones, because they're so sincere. It's like, I forget their names though. I think Bible Flockbox is one. I think he's a Seventh-day Adventist. And he's just so incredibly kind and sincere, but he's just like, and you just kind of feel for the guy. I fold kings pre-flop. Now there's a real man, Andrew Atkins. You just know when they have pocket rockets, right? What do you think is more divisive in this country of the United States, politics or religion? I know they're kind of intertwined, but do you think the animosity is greater between Democrats and Republicans, or let's say Christians and atheists? There's my question for the chat. More divisiveness in politics or in religion? Republicanism is a religion. Well, I think it's totally okay to view secular humanism as a religion. Like, I don't push back on that word religion too hard. If someone wants to say, "Oh, atheism is just a religion," I don't think they've ever seen me say, "Oh no, it's not." Because it's such a silly comment that you might as well just rather go with, "Yeah, it is a religion. It's the best one out there. Would you like to join?" Whenever you feel like you're about to be the most abrasive back, just kind of embrace the idea and almost just, well, Mike Winger would say that'd be mocking. Oh, well, I forget what I was about to say. I love Ray Comfort. He always makes me laugh. Yeah, that's another great example. Ray Comfort's one of those really sincere guys that it's totally wrong, but he makes you laugh. I think whenever you fall in love with a political party, you should start doubting yourself. start questioning yourself, no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, Libertarian, whatever. If you find yourself loving your party too much, take a step back and and look for reasons to not like your own party, your own political beliefs. In other words, I'm giving the same advice I gave Mike Winger the other day, like be overly skeptical what's really important to you. I think that's the best way to stay in check with truth. Mocking is useful. It made me laugh as a Christian, made me look into it more. Yeah, it's just the ability to relax and laugh at yourself, and that's why I loved Mr. Deity. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it a night, but this has been fun. My guess is I apologize for not answering questions on my last video, why I no longer go to church sermons like these, but I really wanted to keep those types of videos a little more pure and a little shorter, even though they're still over an hour long. But this has been fun. I was bored, so you guys cheered me up a little bit tonight and gave me something to do. Have a great rest of your weekend, and maybe we'll see you sometime this week. Take care.